"What are you doing here?" That was the first thing they said. No hello. No badge number. Just those 5 words, sharp, cold, and dripping with suspicion. But before we dive into that explosive moment, let's rewind a bit and set the scene. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. The sun was shining bright in the sky, the kind of day that begged for a cool drink, a comfy chair, and a few quiet hours by the pool. For Marcus Williams, a 32-year-old software engineer and entrepreneur, that was the plan. Marcus lived in a gated luxury apartment complex just outside Atlanta. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't visiting. He paid rent, a lot of it, actually. Apartment 307 was his, and he worked hard to live there. After long days working from home, coding late into the night, and managing his growing tech startup, he valued moments like this. Alone time by the pool to relax, reset, and breathe. He grabbed his towel, a bottle of water, his Kindle, and walked to the private pool that only residents had access to. It was quiet, just him, the sound of birds, and the gentle splash of water in the background. Then came the interruption. Marcus had only been there about 10 minutes when 2 white police officers entered the pool area. They walked in with purpose, not like they were looking for someone who needed help, but like they were hunting someone who didn't belong. Both had that look. You know the one. Suspicion. Assumption. Control. One of them asked, "What are you doing here?" Marcus looked up, a little confused. "Excuse me?" Again, "What are you doing here? Do you live here?" It took a second to register what was happening. Marcus had done nothing wrong. He wasn't playing loud music. He wasn't drinking or causing trouble. He was just existing. And yet here were 2 officers questioning his right to be there. He stood up calmly and replied, "Yes, I live here. Apartment 307. Is there a problem?" But the officers weren't convinced. In fact, they didn't even respond to that. Instead, they started asking more questions. "Do you have ID? What do you do for work? Why are you alone? Why haven't we seen you before?" That's when Marcus felt it, the shift. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about following the rules. It was about one thing. He didn't look like he belonged. Marcus is a tall, dark-skinned black man. Athletic build. Well-dressed, but casual. To anyone watching, he looked like a regular guy enjoying his day. But to the wrong eyes, he looked suspicious. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to him, but it was the most blatant. He noticed a few of his neighbors watching from their balconies. Some peeked through curtains. Others pulled out their phones and started recording. One neighbor, an older white woman, whispered something to her husband and pointed toward Marcus. He could feel the eyes, the judgment, the assumption. But what the officers didn't know was that Marcus was recording too. Silently, calmly, without saying a word, he had started filming the moment they approached him. Every word, every question, every false assumption, captured. Why? Because Marcus knew how this story could end. He'd seen the headlines. He'd seen the hashtags. Black men like him had ended up in handcuffs, or worse, for less. But he also knew something else. He wasn't going to let that happen. Not today. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every person who's ever been questioned, harassed, or treated like a threat just for being who they are. And Marcus? He was about to take back control of the narrative and show the world exactly what happened next. The questions kept coming, and none of them made sense. Are you visiting someone? Where's your key card? Why haven't we seen you around before? Marcus could hardly believe it. He had just told them he lived there. Apartment 307. Yet somehow, that wasn't enough. The 2 officers, both white and both visibly skeptical, weren't trying to understand the situation. They were trying to prove a narrative they had already created the second they saw Marcus by the pool. A black man, alone, in a quiet, mostly white complex. To them, that was suspicious enough. Marcus calmly reached into his bag and pulled out his key fob, the one that only residents were issued. He held it up, cool and composed. "This opens the gate. This opens my building. I've lived here for 3 years." But again, it didn't back down. One of the officers leaned in closer, voice sharp and dismissive. "That's not proof of identity. Do you have an ID on you? Something with your address?" Now Marcus was getting frustrated, but he kept his cool. He had dealt with this kind of thing before, though not to this extent. He responded, "I didn't bring my wallet. I came out here to read. not to go grocery shopping. And that's when the second officer muttered something under his breath. Not loud enough for Marcus to hear clearly, but loud enough for it to sting. Marcus could feel it. The disrespect, the assumption, the danger. These officers weren't treating him like a resident. They were treating him like a criminal. Like he had done something wrong by simply existing in a space they didn't think he belonged in. Let's be clear, Marcus wasn't doing anything illegal. He was sitting, reading, breathing, being. But in America, sometimes that's all it takes. And here's the part that stung the most. Someone had called the police. Someone in the building saw Marcus by the pool and decided the proper response wasn't to say hi, but to call 911. They didn't see a neighbor. They didn't see a fellow resident. They saw a threat. That's what racial profiling does. It turns normal, peaceful, everyday moments into dangerous encounters. It tells black people, you don't belong. It says, you're guilty until proven innocent. And Marcus knew it. He could feel his heart racing, not from fear, but from frustration. The kind that comes from knowing you've done everything right, and you're still being treated like a suspect. But here's what made Marcus different. He was ready. While one officer continued to question him, Marcus subtly adjusted his phone to get a better angle. He made sure the screen was facing out, just in case they tried anything. He wasn't hiding the fact he was recording. He was making it obvious. Because sometimes a phone can be the only protection a black man has. Still, the officers kept pushing. They asked where he worked. He told them he owned a tech startup. They looked at each other and scoffed. Oh really? One said. That's interesting. Marcus had to stop himself from laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Let me get this straight, he said. You think I don't live here because I'm sitting quietly by the pool? And now, because I said I run a company, I must be lying too? They didn't respond. By now, a few neighbors had come out. Some recorded. Others whispered. No one said a word to defend Marcus. No one stepped in. And that's when Marcus realized he was on his own, but he wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to shrink himself or explain away his existence. He wasn't going to let these officers turn a sunny afternoon into another viral tragedy. Because deep down, Marcus knew something powerful. If they want answers, fine, but I've got questions of my own. And the truth is on my side. What the cops didn't know was that Marcus was about to change the game. Up until this point, Marcus had kept calm. He'd answered every question, presented his key fob, and remained composed, even as the officers poked holes in his truth. But now, he was done playing defense. He looked the officer straight in the eye and said firmly, "You want more proof? Fine. Let me call someone who can clear this up real quick." The officers stiffened a bit. "Who are you calling?" One of them asked, suddenly uneasy. Marcus didn't break eye contact. The building manager. The tone shifted. In that moment, the officers realized they were no longer in control of the situation. Up until now, they had been steering the conversation, throwing questions, doubting answers, acting like they were the authority on who did or didn't belong. But now Marcus had flipped the script. He pulled out his phone, not just to record, but to take action. He scrolled through his contacts and hit call. Ring, ring. Then an answer. "Hey, it's Marcus from 307. I need you to come to the pool area. Right now. The police are here. They're questioning whether I live here." The response on the other end was immediate. "Oh my God. I'm on my way." About 4 minutes later, Karen Mitchell, the complex's on-site manager, came power walking through the pool gate, phone still in hand, face full of confusion and concern. She looked at Marcus, then the officers. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice loud and demanding. One officer spoke up quickly. "We received a call about a suspicious individual who didn't appear to belong here. We're just checking it out." Karen frowned and turned toward Marcus. "Suspicious? This is Marcus. He's lived here longer than half the people in this building." She turned back to the officers. "He's a great tenant. Pays on time. Never causes any problems. You've got the wrong guy." You could almost hear the wind being knocked out of the officer's confidence. The second officer, clearly uncomfortable, tried to recover. "We were just doing our job. Someone called it in. We had to follow protocol." But Marcus wasn't buying it. He stepped forward, still calm, still composed, but no longer just reacting. Now he was leading. Let's be honest, he said. If I looked different, if my skin was lighter, you probably wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be asking if I live here. You'd assume I do. Silence. Karen didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The truth was out there, floating heavy in the humid air. By now, several more neighbors had come outside. A few were whispering to each other. Some looked uncomfortable. A couple avoided eye contact altogether. But what mattered most? Everything had been recorded. From the very first moment they questioned him to now, every word, every shift in tone, every denial of the truth, it was all captured on Marcus's phone. He looked down at the screen and quietly stopped recording. Thanks, Karen, he said. That's all I needed. The officers, sensing they were now the ones being watched, began to fumble their way out of the situation. All right, sir, you have a good day. Sorry for the inconvenience. Marcus nodded but didn't smile. The inconvenience is being made to feel like a criminal in my own home. But yeah, you have a good day too. The cops left, the pool area slowly cleared, and Marcus was once again alone. But things had changed. This wasn't just about a peaceful afternoon by the water anymore. It wasn't even just about Marcus. It was about what happens when you fight back with truth, calm, and receipts. Because in that moment, Marcus had done something powerful. He didn't just protect himself. He exposed the system. Marcus went back to his apartment that day with more than just frustration. He went back with evidence. And not just any evidence. The kind that speaks louder than any argument. Video proof of racial profiling, denial, and humiliation, all captured in real time. He didn't post the video right away. First, he reviewed the footage. He watched every second, every question, every dismissive glance from the officers. And then, with a deep breath and a caption that read, "Imagine being harassed by cops while relaxing by your own pool. This is what being black in America looks like. Hashtag pool while black." He uploaded it to TikTok, then Instagram, then Twitter. He figured some friends might share it. Maybe a few hundred people would see it. But within 2 hours, it had over 100,000 views. By the end of the night, 1.2 million. The video was everywhere. Comments flooded in from around the country. Left speech bubble, "I'm so sorry you went through this, Marcus. We see you." Left speech bubble, "This is why we keep filming. This is why we don't stay quiet." Left speech bubble, "Those cops need to be held accountable." Period. Even some celebrities began to chime in. An actor with 10 million followers reposted the video. Activists began tagging the local police department. Civil rights lawyers offered to help, for free. The story hit the local news by morning, then national networks by nightfall. And within 24 hours, the pressure was on. The police department released a statement. "We are aware of the video circulating online and are reviewing the incident. The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Translation? They were caught, and now they had to play defense. But Marcus wasn't finished. He didn't just want an apology. He didn't want a quiet internal review. He wanted real, visible, meaningful change. So, with a team of lawyers, he filed a formal complaint with the city's Civilian Review Board and announced a racial discrimination suit against the department. And guess what? He had the receipts. The video wasn't just emotional, it was airtight. It showed the officers questioning Marcus after he clearly stated he lived there. It showed them doubting his keycard, dismissing his job, ignoring the building manager's confirmation. And worst of all, it showed how routine this kind of harassment had become. But the beauty of the internet? It doesn't forget. People across the country began sharing their own experiences using the hashtag #PoolWhileBlack. Parents told stories about their teenage sons being questioned at community centers. Women shared how they were followed around luxury stores. A man in Texas even shared a similar pool incident from a year before. Only his wasn't recorded. Marcus's story had become a movement. Local organizations hosted town halls. Protesters rallied at the steps of the police station. News outlets invited Marcus to speak on air. And through it all, he kept his message clear. This isn't just about me sitting at a pool. It's about being told, over and over again, that you don't belong, that your skin is a threat. I'm not just demanding justice for myself. I'm demanding it for everyone who's never had the chance to speak up. In less than a week, the officers faced a disciplinary hearing. The chief of police issued a public apology, not just to Marcus, but to the community. But Marcus wasn't looking for apologies. He wanted accountability. And thanks to his bravery and that one powerful video, that's exactly what he started to get. By now, Marcus Williams was no longer just that guy at the pool. He was a voice, a symbol, a spark that had ignited something much bigger than he ever expected. But let's be clear, this wasn't something he asked for. He didn't wake up that day looking to go viral. He wasn't trying to be an activist or a trending hashtag. He just wanted peace. A book, some sunlight, a moment of calm. That's all. And yet, in the span of just a few minutes, his entire afternoon and his entire world had been flipped upside down because of one lie, one phone call, and two officers who assumed he didn't belong. But instead of walking away bitter, Marcus chose something more powerful: purpose. In the weeks that followed the incident, Marcus continued to speak out. Not for attention, not for clout, but for change. He began attending community forums, speaking at local schools, and even met with city officials to talk about racial bias training for police. He made it clear, this can't just be another story we forget about when the next video goes viral. This needs to be a moment that wakes people up. Marcus started working with a local nonprofit that helps Black youth understand their rights when dealing with law enforcement. He also launched an online campaign called I Belong Here, aimed at empowering people of color to reclaim their spaces, whether that's a pool, a boardroom, or a sidewalk. And his message? It was simple, yet powerful. We are not guests in this country. We are not visitors in our own neighborhoods. We are not threats. We are citizens, professionals, students, mothers, fathers, dreamers, leaders. We belong here. What struck people the most about Marcus's story was how calmly he handled it. He didn't scream. He didn't escalate. He didn't lose his temper. But that doesn't mean he wasn't angry. He was deeply, not just for himself, but for every person who never got the chance to walk away. He told reporters in an interview, "What if I hadn't been recording? What if I had raised my voice? Would this story have ended the same way? Or would I be just another name we say in hashtags?" That question, raw and real, haunted people because it highlighted the thin, fragile line Black people often walk when dealing with authority. One wrong tone, one wrong move, and everything can change. That's what made Marcus's story matter. Not just the confrontation itself, but the systemic pattern it revealed. The silent fears so many live with. The code switching, the second guessing, the constant need to prove that you belong. For some, Marcus became a hero. For others, he was a wake-up call. But to Marcus, he was still just a man trying to live his life. He said it best during a podcast interview. "I don't want to be famous for surviving racism. I want to be forgotten for having the freedom to just exist." That line struck a chord, and it's why his message continues to spread. Schools invited him to speak. Tech companies asked him to consult on workplace inclusion. A documentary filmmaker even approached him about turning his story into a short film. But Marcus stayed grounded. He kept his business running. He kept showing up for his community. And most importantly, he kept using his voice for others who couldn't. He spoke at a candlelight vigil for another young Black man who was stopped and detained without cause. He showed up at City Hall when a mayor proposed funding for better police training. And every time he was given a microphone, he passed it to someone else when he could, because he believed this movement wasn't about him. It was about all of us. Before the incident, Marcus had a few hundred followers online. Today, he has tens of thousands. And he uses his platform not for viral moments, but for real conversations. He posts videos about knowing your rights, dealing with racial profiling, and staying safe during police encounters. He shares resources for mental health, especially for Black men. And most of all, he reminds his audience of one unshakable truth. Your existence is not a crime. So, where's Marcus now? He still lives in apartment 307. He still goes to the pool. He still reads his books and enjoys the sun. But now, when he sits down in that lounge chair, he carries something with him. Not fear, but purpose. Because Marcus turned pain into power. He turned injustice into inspiration. And most importantly, he reminded the world that sometimes one quiet man with a camera and a calm voice can shake the system.